Hi, I'm going to give a hopefully a bit short presentation about React. Who knows React? Okay, cool. And how many people use React? That are my colleagues. Are there people that are really opinionated about front-end frameworks here?
Please leave the room.
1, 2, and your opinion is probably don't use them, or?
Yeah.
What's your opinion?
Well, choose something that fits your purpose and don't pick one for everything because that's easier.
Okay, cool.
And have a good reason for one.
Thanks. My name is Jan Deelstra. I work here at HackerOne. I'm a software engineer. I do a lot of things. I'm probably not the best person to give this talk. I buy hardware for servers. I configure virtual machines, hypervisors. I do backend. I do front end. I do everything. And I'm not really the best at anything. I just manage on all levels. I'm not the one who introduced React at HackerOne. There was another company, Veclink, who actually started implementing and migrating all their legacy code to React. So we waited a bit until they solved all the horrible things they had to fix to get it working. And when we saw that they were successful, we really used a lot of their code and their experience to jumpstart our own migration. Most of my work is in CoffeeScript, so if there aren't any semicolons or I type return too many times Javascript, then I'm sorry. Also, there's one slide in CoffeeScript, so if you have any problems with that, please close your eyes. I'm reachable on Twitter, and my email address is down at the bottom. Okay, let's start. What is React? React is a framework created by Facebook. Facebook created a framework called XHP. It's a PHP parent. In 2010 they open sourced it. Their objective was to mitigate cross-site scripting attacks and make it really easy for developers to see what they were doing. So they embedded XML in their PHP, and every time you interpolated strings in that XML, it gets sanitized. So that made it a lot easier for developers to quickly start using templates and write safe code by default. That's the reason it started. Facebook, of course, evolved, and they started doing a lot more things in the front end and built a big application with a lot of AJAX requests. And they couldn't find any technology that really suited them. Most of the technologies that were out there had quite a steep learning curve and weren't safe by default or things like that. So one guy got half a year off because he proposed to rewrite XHP to JavaScript. I think his name is Peter Hunt. Anybody?
Yeah.
React is the V in MVC. It's really the view part. It's the display logic and the templating. It's not opinionated about your models in your front end or how you do your data requests. It doesn't interfere with that. So it plays nicely with all other frameworks, and it's really meant to build nice user interfaces that are easy to understand and easy to reason about. So there are a lot of developers at Facebook, and they try to get everyone as productive as quickly as possible. So it's one of their reasons. So XHP, I don't know, who knows XHP here? Anyone? Like one finger. Yay. Well, that's kind of a problem. They open sourced it in 2010, and it's actually not that bad for everybody who does PHP, because it sanitizes your output and it has templating, it has nice features. But they just open sourced it and they didn't give any talks about it. They did nothing. So it didn't get popular. I think before React was launched, there was one external blog post about XHP. So for a company like Facebook, that's like really bad. one of the objectives in open sourcing React was to get community involved, because it takes a lot of time to build a framework like this, and it's nice to have other people's opinion and let other people use it and get feedback and get features back into it. So they wanted to do a better job than when they open sourced XHP. So they made presentations, went to events, they wrote blog posts. They really tried to popularize it, and they succeeded in it. It was launched a year ago, and at the moment, almost half of the pull requests or commits are from external developers. So they're doing a lot better than they did with XHP. Also adoption-wise, it's used by a lot of companies. For example, Khan Academy started using it like a few weeks after it was open sourced, and they contributed a lot of code to it. But also Airbnb, Mozilla. Mozilla wrote some browser functionality for Firefox in React, some management panels for, I think, WebSockets-like stuff or something. GitHub, they made an editor, Atom. I don't probably will know it. It's quite popular or famous in the app, and it was kind of sluggish, or not really, not fast enough. So we rewrote the editing part in React, and I think it was quite successful. It was quite nice speed to Atom. And also the concept that React uses there are a lot of new frameworks out there that use concepts from React. So it seems to be quite a successful open source framework. But I'll tell you a little bit more about it. For everyone who does Angular, there are opinions that React should be the views of Angular at certain points.
There are already ports for Angular and React.
There are a few Angular core committers that have the opinion that browsers should solve this problem, and I don't really know if it's possible, but we shall see what the future brings. Okay, well, let me start with explaining a few design decisions they made. This old code we have. I think Eamon can remember this. This exact thing. This other company had prototyped React, and we used a lot of their knowledge. This is a backbone marionette view, and this is the template that's associated with it. It's not a complete file. I just took the top part to make a point. Well, there are two files, and they are separated. And to me, it's not clear what the reason for the separation is. I mean, they're both controlling the view. One is really tied to another. There are a lot of events defined on DOM elements. On other places in this view, there's also jQuery manipulations of the DOM of this template. So they're doing a bit of the same. Only the mustache templates, they're really stupid. You can't do anything except ifs and a few other constructs in them. So you can't put any logic in them. They're a bit closer to HTML, and this of course is JavaScript, so you probably put all your display logic in JavaScript and make partials, and you end up with a lot of files. Well, the opinion of XHP was you embed your XML in your PHP files that make your view, because they're the same. It's not a separation of concern, it's a separation of technology. It's not always useful to do this. But there are also downsides of upsides to this. When you tweak a lot of styles in your templates, and you do a lot of have designers that are constantly busy with renaming classes and updating styles and stuff like that, stuff that doesn't really hit your display logic, maybe it makes sense. But for most companies, when you make a change in this one, you probably make a change in that one and all the way around. So that's why React does it differently. They put your views in your JavaScript. This is a Hello World example of React. There wasn't any on the React tutorial website, so I took a bit of a scaffold they had on it and put a Hello World in it. I'll shortly explain how it works. Let me first explain this line here. It's the JSX transformer. What it does is import a JavaScript file, it searches for all the type text JSX files, and it transforms this little part to JavaScript. it uses this directive to say, every XML element in here, you need to translate that to react.dom.div, that function. And this is the second argument. Now properties of this XML element are the first argument and are put in a hash. So this is called a component, this part. This is display name. It's used for debugging and to show it nicely and to reuse it nicely in other components. And this is the render function that outputs what the page should look like. And underneath here is the React render component. And you see that a component is created, and here's a container to mount the component in your DOM. So the only thing that this does is show hello world in a div on this page. Maybe a bit complicated, and I'm working for a few, more than half a year or so with React. So if you have any questions or it's not clear what I'm explaining, please raise your hand and I'll try to do a better job. So.
It's clear, but I still have my question.
Okay.
React components have to be in one HTML component, right? You can't just return two divs. It has to be in div, right?
Yeah, the root component, the root of what's returned here should be one div, one element. The element can have children, you also always need to have one element returned. It's a bit annoying, I agree with you, that's probably, but it's...
Angular has the same limitation.
Yeah,
Now
the patches on React because they have
okay, so the upside about using this notation to mount your component in the DOM somewhere is that you can gradually rewrite. The upside of this notation is that you can gradually rewrite your application. If you got a static application, you can just take one DOM node that's quite far in your tree of DOM nodes and just put one React component in it and just play around with it. You don't have to rewrite your whole application at once. So, everybody clear a bit how this works, the basics of React?
One more question.
Yeah.
You will actually replace the content of the content div if you put something in there?
Yeah. No, to put it in this container.
Yeah, but if you have something in the HTML within the div with the ID
yeah, it will
content.
replace it.
Okay.
Yeah. Normally you can also re-render components in one div.
Yeah.
It also always will clean up if it finds any old components in it.
Okay.
And I think if there's other HTML or DOM elements in it, it will just destroy it.
Okay.
I'm not completely certain, but I think that's the case. Yeah. Also, this line that transforms your JSX in your browser, please don't use it in production. It's not that fast, and it's not the best way. You can pre-process it. Okay. Well, this is a bit more advanced example of a React component. It's a little widget. It has an argument. It has, where is it? Arguments are called properties, and this props.time is the argument of the time ago. So you call this component and you give it a time prop, and the time prop will make the components show how many days, hours, minutes, or seconds ago this has happened. And there will be a label, there will be the title, so if you hover it, it will show the original data that happened. So if you have a nice list of activities, it will say, 2 seconds ago, 5 seconds ago, 10 seconds ago, 30 seconds ago. It's a bit more complicated because we also want to update this constantly. We don't want to have a static time ago. If you keep your browser open, we want to show 10 seconds ago, 20 seconds ago, 30 seconds ago. So the page looks alive. We don't know how many times the user will refresh this page. So this is the argument it gets. It gets only one argument. And when it gets initialized, it has property now. That's the current time. So it calculates the difference between now and the problem time, and it will render that. So this bit of logic does that. There's a bit of magic going on here. because on the component there's been called a set interval that will update time at every 60 seconds. And this method is provided by a mixin. I'll explain in the next slide how this mixin works. But there are ways in React to extend your modules in a way that is, I don't know, cross-concern, cutting cross-concerns or something like that. I always get it wrong. But anyway, so every time this component is updated, so every time the interval updates the state of the component, the whole component gets rendered again. So if at a certain point in time, it's 2 years ago, there will be a lot of updates here that won't affect how the DOM looks, because it will still be 2 years ago. It will be rounded down to, and if you wait a year, you keep your browser open for a year, or 3 years ago. So there's a lot of waste there. And let me see, is there something else I should explain? Oh yeah, this I explained. No, I think this is most of it. Well, this, for example, is a component that we want to open source ourselves. I will do that in the next couple of weeks. We try to open source the components that could be useful for other people. Momentarily, we just got one that is open source. It's a date picker, and it's really easy to reuse. This one would also be a component that's quite easy to reuse. The nice thing is that there's so little opinionated stuff in this that most people could reuse without adjusting the code of this component itself. Okay, so, but do you guys agree that this part of the render method looks a bit ugly? This isn't using JSX, it's using just what JSX is compiled into. Because JSX is an optional part of React, it isn't mandatory. So if you don't like to have XML in your JavaScript, you could just skip that part, and maybe you even want to create a nice wrapper method like _span or deepen span or something like that to remove some duplicate code. Okay. This is how the mixin looks like. There are some lifecycle methods like component will mount and component will unmount and set interval. And every mixin that is imported in a module, their mixin of their lifecycle methods will be called before the lifecycle methods of the component. So the component did mount this method of this module component, will be called after component will mount in this mixin will be called. So you can really extend and add things before the component can work with it. This interval mixin will make sure that your set interval methods will be cleaned up nicely. There's array allocated here, and when the component will be unmounted, all the clear intervals will be removed. So.
Is it then the other way around, the unmount?
Is an unmount called after the unmount of the...
I'm not really sure actually. There's some general documentation about it. It says that the methods are called before, but it would make sense when the unmount methods will be called after. So we should check. But good point. Yeah. Okay. So if you want to have more complicated render methods and you want to do interactive things like this is part of a component that has a focus state. You can see it here. And so this is the render method. So the render method renders a div. It renders a date input component as a child of that div, and another child of the div is a distant calendar method. So that calendar method returns when the state is focused. It returns a pop over with a calendar in it. I just talked about the component we're open sourcing. This is actually a part of our calendar component, and this way you can limit the amount of lines in your render methods and make it a bit more interactive without creating a lot of inline ifs in the render method. But still, this looks a bit nasty to have it like this. Actually, in CoffeeScript, when you're using the DOM and the component methods directly in your render, it looks better because you don't need the return, you don't need all the braces. It's a lot of clutter at the moment if you use plain JavaScript and this style of React programming. So this is the version of JSX. It's a bit different. I actually don't need this one, and I don't need that one, but for the rest it's quite okay. It's a lot more like the actual DOM would look like. And when you call components like this, like with XML tags, it even looks a bit widget-like, or like some new HTML5 specs they're creating. And when you have Chrome, you can download a React debug plugin, and you can navigate not your DOM, but your React DOM. So it will actually show all these XML tags in your DOM, which is really cool because the conceptual gap between what you're doing in your views and what's in your browser is then really, really small. So it really enhances your reasoning about what your code should do and what's going wrong, and to fix it easily. Also, it helps designers or people that are less familiar with JavaScript to do small changes to this. That's one of the reasons that Facebook mentions for using this syntax. That most of the developers at Facebook want to build 80% of the feature and all the pixel pushing, as they call it. They don't want to bother with it, and they just want to give some designers commit access to it and just do what you want, add some classes, just put a div around it, add a span somewhere. It's okay, no problem. So, okay. This is the CoffeeScript slide. You can actually do the JSX thingy also in CoffeeScript. Looks also nice. Just wanted to mention it's also there are also other platforms. I think TypeScript, does TypeScript have it even? No. Okay, rendering. Well, the concept is that the whole page will be rendered every time you request a page. And that's one of the reasons why React is so simple to work with. Because you have some state in the component, there are some props passed in it, and there's a render method. You only have to see what the render method does, and you know what the state of your DOM will be. There are no async DOM manipulations or things you're not really certain about or should check. The only thing is this component mounted? Oh, it's mounted. Okay, well, then it's rendered in the DOM. So you only have to see how the render method, what it outputs. It also enhances testability a lot, because you can just make a unit test and let it return a string of what it's rendered. So you don't need a PhantomJS or Selenium implementation. Also, server-side rendering of your JavaScript components. Possible, no problem. You can do that. There are also, well, I'll get to that. It's better when I do that later. So, virtual DOM, and then the virtual DOM on T2 will be diffed with the virtual DOM on T1. And all the changes, in this case these two nodes, will be mutated on the actual DOM. And these changes can be batched every frame that has to be drawn, so it's really efficient. This is the real DOM to DOM manipulation. And React only writes to your DOM. It doesn't read from your DOM. It uses keys to identify nodes in your DOM, and it just keeps on writing. An advantage is normally you've got problems that you're writing to your DOM and you're reading to your DOM, and it gets really slow because your DOM has to reflow, repaint, I don't know what, it has to calculate a lot of things. But if you only write to your DOM and you batch those, you don't have any of those problems. And also, because it just mutates little parts of your DOM, you don't lose your scroll position, you don't lose your input cursor, you don't lose your selections. There are a lot of advantages to this. And it's also really fast. There are also some other advantages of using a virtual DOM. For example, they implemented the whole event model for the virtual DOM that is compatible with HTML5 events, and also gives you the ability to use HTML5 events in EA8 and other older browsers. So it standardizes a lot of the interactions you have to do with the DOM. It does event delegation, so it only puts one listener on the whole page, and then it checks with event target which event is actually targeted, so that makes it also a bit faster and stuff like that. The virtual DOM isn't limited to actual browser DOM implementations. We also have virtual DOM implementations for Canvas and SVG, maybe for music, I don't know, maybe that would be a really cool project. But there are a lot of different targets you can use to render, to change instead of the DOM. Okay. Also, because you don't need access to the DOM for most parts of your rendering and logic, you can put most of your React app in a web worker, and for example have a little bridge that makes a change to the DOM, but do most part of it just in another process, or in an iOS native view with an Objective-C bridge or something. There are a lot of different use cases to use it. Okay. Well, best practices are, well, it's a bit of a list of things that are a bit different than maybe other JavaScript front-end frameworks. The amount of state that is in your components should be minimized, because states make things more complicated. Especially when you keep state not in the most logical part, but some root element, and then, for example, when a component gets focused, you want to keep that state in the component that actually gets focused, because nothing else in your application will probably need that, or if it needs it, you have to save it where it is needed.
But what if it's needed in multiple places?
Well, that's a good question, but most of the time when it's needed in multiple places, especially in multiple leaves of your DOM tree or component tree, it's part of your core logic, and the state shouldn't be kept in your views. It should be kept in your application state, so to speak. So, also mutating the DOM directly isn't really nice, because React only writes to your DOM. So you could run into problems when that happens. So also it's harder to reason about what your component actually does. So it's best to just change state, re-render. Change state, re-render. Keep it simple. Don't use any fancy things for simple. You can think of components just as little tiny state machines. It's actually the same as the previous point. If you think of it as a state machine which has multiple states and just re-renders, it's really easy to comprehend what actually is happening. Also, the props I'm talking about, like the arguments that are passed on to a component, they should only flow in one direction. And if you have an input somewhere, or you have a text box or a submit button, you can pass a callback to it. And when the callback is called, your application state gets changed, and your application state generates the props for all your components. So your data flows in one direction to your leaf components, and it doesn't have two-directional binding or other magic, which just uses a lot of state and causes a lot of problems.
So in fact, it's a unidirectional data flow.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody heard about Flux. That's a bit of the Flux architecture of that Facebook proposes. I haven't read a lot about it yet, but I think it's similar to this. Well, this is a bit of the same I already said about in response to your question about keeping application state. Normally, at HackerOne we are still searching out the ideal way to solve this problem. If we're going to use still going to use backbone models, we still have those around, and keep our state in that, and make some controller classes that will be in our routers and will push the props to our components, or that we want to have some kind of root component that does all the orchestration and the delegation between our views and our. It's really hard problem to solve, and we haven't found the ideal way yet. But it's a nice problem to have, and we'll play around with it and settle eventually on a certain style. Probably most people also have existing plugins like Tether or Perfect Scroll Bars or other jQuery stuff they really like, and that solves a lot of problems for them. They work differently than your React views, so you cannot use them in your render because they aren't built for them yet anyhow. So I already told a bit about the lifecycle methods, and these are 3 of those. They're a lot different. They're a lot more than those 3. But these 3 you probably will need if you want to have jQuery plugins. Maybe it's easier to give an example directly. Well, this is part of a component that wraps some children in a perfect scroll bar div, and I just changed a little bit to usable concepts. Let me explain. When the component gets mounted, it takes distant refs. Ref is like a pointer or a reference to a DOM node. This DOM node has a ref scroll element, so it's easy to get a certain DOM element, and then I put jQuery thingy around it and I call perfect scroll bar on it. So this div will get perfect scroll bar integration, and every time the component updates, so it changes size, for example, we update perfect scroll bar too, so it adjusts its scroll bars when the width or the height of the component changes. And then when the component gets unmounted, we need to destroy perfect scroll bar, otherwise we're prone to memory leaks and other stuff. So this is a bit of the way you integrate with those jQuery plugins. It's not ideal because it works really different than React, and you sometimes have problems that, for example, Tether, it wants to have a div that's not in your body, but outside your, not inside the place you're rendering something with React. It wants to have a DOM node somewhere outside, and it wants to do all kind of things to it. And React doesn't really support that, so that involves a lot of hacking and crazy React components. But the nice part is, if you get it working and you get you have a React component that uses Tether as positioning library, if somebody doesn't know, then you can put some children in that component, and they'll be in the Tether box positions where you want. And so you can solve the problem, and you put your hacky code into one place and just start using it without without looking at the early code here. I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago. It's called Javascript Gather. I really like it. Brandon Ike, the guy who invented, or how do you call it, created JavaScript, he was really positive about React. And he was already talking about maybe browser support for certain features of React, and well, he was really supportive of the whole idea of React. So I hope and I think it's something that's going to stick, because working with it really is a blast. It's really a lot better than, a lot easier than working with, for example, a backbone marionette views we were working earlier with. So this is it. One thing I forgot to mention, there are a lot of debugging, performance and testing tools associated with React. But you can give a talk that's really a lot longer, but I hope this... Hey, anyone any questions?
Yeah, I have one question. You already talked about Flux. Are there any plans at HackerOne to migrate your backbone logic to a Flux logic to have the full Facebook application stack? Or isn't that something you have looked into yet?
Well, personally I haven't looked into it, but I know some colleagues, one colleague of mine is looking into it. And he has a bit more of a dislike against backbone models than I have. So so we probably are going to change the way we're using backbone models. Because now in a lot of components that aren't root components, we're still doing fetches of backbone models in our components that are lower below the root components. So that's not really good because it's really bad for reusability and stuff like that. So we're going to make a lot of changes there, but I'm not certain if we're going to use Flux. But it looks interesting. Well, but it's not really a new concept.
No.
So. There's a ClojureScript library. I forgot its name, Code or something. I don't know. But it actually is a predecessor to Flux, and it's a bit less brought with a bang than Facebook announces new architecture. That's so. There are also similar technologies. Any other questions? Would anyone? Oh, sorry.
You mentioned React also works with SVG.
Yeah, there. I think it's a plugin or something, and you can render SVG in your render method instead of DOM nodes.
Okay.
So you can dynamically change SVG.
Great.
Yeah. There are also Canvas plugins, and there are a lot of different. MathML, Khan Academy did something with Tech and MathML, I think so. There are a lot of different.
So there's a community of plugin writers.
Well, the community is still very splintered. There are some. For example, Khan Academy has a GitHub repository with all their components, and they have open sourced a lot of their all their applications too. So you can pick one of those, but they're not really easy to reuse because it isn't a powered package or anything like that. So at HackerOne, the only component we open source, we made a power package for it, so it's really easy to import in your application. But it's still really new, and people aren't too good at communicating and making other people use their components yet. There's a lot of open playing field to create cool components and. Would anyone consider trying out React, or does it look appealing, or yeah?
I think some of the concepts, especially the DOM dipping, is a very successful concept because, for example, MBS is planning on implementing DOM dipping themselves in the mobile templating. So if people copy it, it's actually good most of the time. So
cool. Yeah. Okay. So, thank you guys.